The fluorescent lights of Bella's beauty salon hummed their familiar tune as Sarah Martinez ran her fingers through her freshly styled auburn hair. It was 6:47 p.m. on October 15th, 2010, and the autumn chill was already creeping through the windows of the small salon in Millbrook, a quiet suburb 30 miles outside of Chicago. "You look absolutely stunning, honey," said Linda, the salon owner, as she swept the last strands of hair from around Sarah's chair. "That new cut really brings out your eyes." Sarah smiled at her reflection, adjusting the collar of her navy blue cardigan. At 28, she was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying, not because she was conventionally beautiful, but because she radiated the kind of warmth that made strangers feel like old friends. Her laugh was infectious, her smile genuine, and her habit of checking on everyone around her had earned her the nickname Mom among her co-workers at the insurance firm downtown. "Thank you so much, Linda. You're a miracle worker," Sarah said, reaching into her purse for her wallet. The leather bag was worn but well-maintained, a gift from her mother 3 Christmases ago. Inside, alongside her credit cards and driver's license, was a photo of her and her boyfriend Marcus at last summer's county fair, both of them grinning widely with cotton candy in their hands. As Linda processed the payment, Sarah pulled out her iPhone 4, still relatively new technology, that she was proud to own. The screen showed 2 missed calls from Marcus and a text message that made her heart skip a beat. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Drive safe. Love you." "Someone's excited to see you," Linda observed, noticing Sarah's smile as she read the message. "Marcus is cooking dinner tonight. He's been planning this surprise menu all week," Sarah replied, typing back quickly. "Just finished at Salon. Heading home now. Can't wait to see what you've made." The salon was nearly empty now. Mrs. Henderson, a regular who came in every Friday for her weekly wash and set, was just finishing up at the shampoo station. The only other customer was a woman Sarah didn't recognize. Mid-40s, dark hair, sitting quietly in the waiting area with a magazine, occasionally glancing up at the television mounted in the corner. "Will you be needing anything else, dear?" Linda asked, handing Sarah her receipt. "Actually, could I schedule my next appointment?" "Same. Time in 6 weeks?" Linda flipped through her appointment book, the pages filled with neat handwriting and blue ink. "How about November 26th at 6:30? That's the Friday after Thanksgiving." "Perfect. I'll probably need the pampering after surviving family dinner," Sarah laughed, and Linda made the notation in her book. As Sarah gathered her things, she noticed the stranger in the waiting area was watching her. When their eyes met, the woman quickly looked away, pretending to be absorbed in her magazine. Something about the interaction felt odd, but Sarah dismissed it. She was probably just being paranoid. Marcus always said she had an overactive imagination. "Have a wonderful evening, Sarah. Drive carefully. It's supposed to rain later," Linda called out as Sarah headed toward the door. "I will. See you in 6 weeks." The bell above the door chimed as Sarah stepped out into the crisp October air. The parking lot was mostly empty, just her silver Honda Civic and 2 other cars. Streetlights were beginning to flicker on, casting long shadows across the asphalt. She could smell wood smoke from someone's fireplace and the faint aroma of pizza from the restaurant next door. Sarah climbed into her car, adjusting the rearview mirror and checking her hair one more time. She looked good, really good. Marcus was going to love the new style. She started the engine, and her phone immediately connected to the car's Bluetooth system, a feature she was still getting used to. As she backed out of the parking space, she noticed the strange woman from the salon walking toward a dark sedan parked at the far end of the lot. Again, something felt off, but Sarah couldn't put her finger on what it was. The woman moved with purpose but kept glancing back toward the salon. Sarah's phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. "Traffic's pretty heavy on Route 34. Might want to take the back roads." She typed back at a red light. "Good. Idea. Taking Maple Street route. Should be home by 7:30. Start without me if you get hungry." The response came immediately. "Never. We eat together or not at all. That's the rule." Sarah smiled. That was so like Marcus. Always the romantic, always making sure they shared their meals together. It was one of the things she loved most about him. In a world where everyone seemed to be rushing through life, he insisted on savoring the small moments. The light turned green, and Sarah made the right turn onto Maple Street, leaving the commercial district behind for the winding residential roads that would take her home. The houses here were older, set back from the road with mature oak and maple trees that formed a canopy overhead. In the daylight, it was beautiful. At dusk, with the shadows growing longer, it felt more isolated. Her phone rang through the car speakers. Marcus's name appeared on the dashboard display. "Hey, babe," she answered, keeping her eyes on the road. "Hey yourself. How did the hair appointment go?" "Amazing. Linda worked her magic again. You're going to love it. I love everything about you, so I'm sure I will. Where are you now?" "Just turned onto Maple Street. I should be home in about 15 minutes. "Perfect, I just put the chicken in the oven. Oh, and I picked up that wine you like, the Pinot Grigio from that little vineyard we visited last month." "You're spoiling me," Sarah said, her voice warm with affection. "You deserve to be spoiled. Drive safe, okay? The weather report said there might be some rain moving in." "I will. Love you." "Love you too. Text me when you're home." The call ended, and Sarah found herself humming along to the radio. Life was good, really good. She had a job she enjoyed, a man who adored her, and a future that seemed bright and full of possibilities. Marcus had been hinting about taking their relationship to the next level, and Sarah was ready. More than ready. The road curved through a section of woods, and Sarah slowed down slightly. This part of Maple Street was notorious for deer, especially at dusk. She'd seen too many accidents caused by drivers who weren't paying attention. Her headlights cut through the growing darkness, illuminating the yellow center line and the reflective markers along the shoulder. That's when she saw the car behind her. It had been there for a while, she realized, maintaining the same distance even when she'd slowed. Down for the curves. The headlights were bright, too bright, making it impossible to see what kind of vehicle it was or who was driving. When she sped up slightly, the car sped up. When she slowed down, it slowed down. Sarah's heart began to beat a little faster. She told herself she was being ridiculous. It was probably just someone else taking the same route home. Maple Street was a popular shortcut for people trying to avoid the traffic on the main roads. But the feeling of unease grew stronger. She reached for her phone to call Marcus back, then thought better of it. What would she say? That she thought someone might be following her? He'd worry, and there was probably nothing to worry about. She was almost home anyway. The car behind her maintained its distance as Sarah navigated the final series of curves before the straight stretch that led to her neighborhood. Her hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter, and she found herself checking the rearview mirror more frequently. Just as she was beginning to relax, thinking she'd been paranoid after all, the car behind her suddenly accelerated, its headlights growing larger and brighter in her mirror. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. This wasn't normal driving behavior. This was something else entirely. And in that moment, as the unknown vehicle closed the distance between them on the dark, isolated stretch of Maple Street, Sarah Martinez had no idea that she was about to become the center of a mystery that would haunt her family, her community, and law enforcement for the next 10 years. The last text message she would ever send was already composed in her mind. Almost home. Love you. But she would never get the chance to send it. Marcus Chen stood in the kitchen of their shared apartment, stirring the garlic butter sauce that would accompany the herb-crusted chicken currently browning in the oven. The small space smelled like rosemary and thyme, and he'd lit the vanilla candles Sarah loved, creating the perfect ambiance for what he hoped would be a perfect evening. He glanced at the clock on the microwave. 7:45 p.m. Sarah should have been home 15 minutes ago. Marcus wasn't the type to worry easily. As a software engineer for a tech startup downtown, he was logical, methodical, and generally trusted that there was a reasonable explanation for everything. Traffic happened. People ran late. Sarah might have stopped for gas, or gotten caught behind a slow driver on the winding back roads. But something felt different tonight. He pulled his phone from his pocket and checked their text thread. The last message was from Sarah at 7:12 p.m. Just turned onto Maple Street. I should be home in about 15 minutes. Before that, their playful exchange about dinner and wine, her excitement about her new haircut, his reminder to drive safely. Marcus tried calling. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. Hi, you've reached Sarah. I can't come to the phone right now, but leave me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Her voice sounded so cheerful, so alive. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine and immediately scolded himself for being dramatic. He tried again. Same result. By 8 p.m., the chicken was overcooked, and Marcus was pacing the small living room, his phone clutched in his hand. He'd called 3 more times, each call going straight to voicemail. He'd sent 2 text messages. "Hey babe, where are you?" And, "Starting to worry. Please call me." Neither had been delivered. The messages showed as sent, but not delivered, which meant Sarah's phone was either turned off or out of service range. Marcus knew Sarah's habits better than anyone. She never turned her phone off, especially when she was expected somewhere. She was compulsively punctual, the type of person who called if she was going to be even 5 minutes late. And she always responded to his messages within minutes. At 8:15 p.m., Marcus made a decision that would later be scrutinized by police, analyzed by amateur detectives on internet forums, and questioned by Sarah's family for years to come. He got in his car and drove the route Sarah would have taken home. The night air was crisp and carried the scent of autumn leaves and distant wood smoke. Marcus drove slowly down Maple Street, his high beams cutting through the darkness, scanning both sides of the road for any sign of Sarah's silver Honda Civic. The road was empty. No cars, no debris, no skid marks, no indication that anything unusual had happened. Marcus drove the entire route twice, then expanded his search to include the parallel roads and the main highway Sarah might have taken if she'd changed her mind about the back roads. Nothing. At 9:30 p.m., Marcus called the Millbrook Police Department. "Millbrook Police, this is Officer Janet Rodriguez. How can I help?" "You? Hi, I think I need to report a missing person. My girlfriend was supposed to be home 2 hours ago, and she's not answering her phone. Sir, I understand your concern, but we typically require a person to be missing for 24 hours before we can file a missing person report. Has your girlfriend ever stayed out late without calling before?" "No, never. She's the most reliable person I know. She always calls if she's going to be late, and her phone is going straight to voicemail. I drove the route she would have taken home, and there's no sign of her car." Officer Rodriguez's tone softened slightly. "What's your girlfriend's name, sir?" "Sarah Martinez. She's 28, drives a silver 2008 Honda Civic. License plate." Marcus rattled off the number he'd memorized years ago. "And when did you last hear from her?" "She called me at 7:12 p.m. from Maple Street. She said she'd be home in 15 minutes. That was over 2 hours ago. Sir, I'm going to take down your information and have an officer drive the area. Sometimes people have car trouble or their phone dies, and they end up somewhere unexpected. What's your name?" "Marcus Chen. I live at 1247 Oakwood Drive, apartment 3B. And you said she was coming from where?" "Bella's Beauty Salon on Commerce Street. She had a hair appointment at 6:30. Officer Rodriguez made notes as Marcus provided Sarah's description, her phone number, and details about her car. She assured him that a patrol car would check the route and that he should call back if Sarah hadn't returned by morning. But Marcus couldn't wait until morning. At 10:45 p.m., he drove to Bella's Beauty Salon. The strip mall was mostly dark, but he could see Linda's car still in the parking lot. Through the window, he could see her cleaning up, preparing to close for the night. Marcus knocked on the glass door, and Linda looked up, startled. When she recognized him, he'd picked Sarah up from appointments before. She unlocked the door. "Marcus, what are you doing here so late?" "Linda, I'm sorry to bother you, but Sarah never made it home tonight. She left here around 7 p.m. and I haven't heard from her since. Did you notice anything unusual when she left? Anyone following her or acting strange?" Linda's face went pale. "Oh my God. No, nothing unusual. She seemed perfectly fine when she left. Happy, actually. She was excited about dinner with you." Linda paused, thinking. "Although, what? There was another woman here, someone I didn't recognize. She was in the waiting area when Sarah was finishing up, and she seemed to be watching Sarah. I thought it was odd at the time, but you know how it is. Sometimes people are just curious about other people's hair. Can you describe her?" "Mid-40s, maybe. Dark hair, average height. She was reading a magazine, but I caught her looking at Sarah several times. She left right after Sarah did." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "Did you see what kind of car she was driving?" "I'm sorry, I didn't pay attention. I was cleaning up and getting ready to close." Marcus thanked Linda and asked her to call the police if she remembered anything else. As he walked back to his car, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were security cameras mounted on the corners of the strip mall. The next morning, Marcus was back at the police station before it opened, demanding to speak with a detective. By then, Sarah had been missing for 14 hours, and even the most optimistic explanations were beginning to seem unlikely. Detective Ray Morrison was a 20-year veteran of the Millbrook Police Department, a man who'd seen enough missing person cases to know the difference between someone who'd stayed out late and someone who'd genuinely vanished. When Marcus walked into his office at 8 a.m. sharp, Morrison could see the fear and exhaustion etched on the young man's forehead. "Mr. Chen, I've reviewed Officer Rodriguez's report from last night. Tell me about Sarah's state of mind recently. Any problems at work, family issues, financial stress?" "Nothing like that. She loved her job, got along great with her family. We've been together for 3 years and we were talking about getting engaged. She was happy, Detective Morrison. Really happy." "Any ex-boyfriends who might have been bothering her? Anyone who might have had a reason to want to hurt her?" Marcus shook his head. Sarah didn't have enemies. She was the kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, who brought soup to sick coworkers, who volunteered at the animal shelter on weekends. People loved her. Detective Morrison made notes, but Marcus could see the skepticism in his eyes. In the detective's experience, people didn't just vanish without a trace. There was always a reason, always a story beneath the surface. "I want to check the security footage from the salon," Marcus said. "The owner mentioned there was another woman there who seemed to be watching Sarah. We'll look into that. In the meantime, I need you to make a list of everyone Sarah knew. Friends, co-workers, family members, anyone she might have contacted. I also need access to her phone records and bank accounts." As Marcus provided the information Detective Morrison requested, neither man could have imagined that they were beginning an investigation that would consume the next decade of their lives, generate thousands of tips from the public, and ultimately be solved by a piece of evidence so mundane that it had been overlooked for 10 years. The security footage from Bella's beauty salon would indeed show Sarah leaving at 7:03 p.m., walking to her car with a smile on her face, completely unaware that she was being watched. It would also show the mysterious woman in the waiting area, though the angle and lighting would make it impossible to get a clear view of her face. But what the footage wouldn't show, what no one would discover until a decade later, was the small piece of paper that had fallen from Sarah's purse as she paid for her salon services. A piece of paper that would eventually lead investigators to the truth about what happened on Maple Street that October night. For now, though, Sarah Martinez was simply gone, as if she had driven into the darkness and disappeared from the world entirely. Linda Vasquez had owned Bella's beauty salon for 15 years, and in all that time she had never done a complete renovation of the space. The salon had been updated periodically, new chairs here, fresh paint there, but the basic layout and fixtures remained the same as when she'd first opened her doors in 2005. But the COVID-19 pandemic had changed everything. After being forced to close for 3 months in 2020, Linda had decided to use the downtime to completely overhaul the salon. New flooring, new lighting, new workstations. Everything was being torn out and replaced. It was October 15, 2020, exactly 10 years, and one day after Sarah Martinez had walked out of Bella's beauty salon for the last time. The construction crew had been working for 2 weeks, and they were finally ready to remove the old reception desk, a heavy wooden piece that had been built into the corner of the waiting area. Linda had always assumed it was attached to the wall, but when the workers started dismantling it, they discovered that it was actually a standalone piece that had been pushed tightly against the corner. "Mrs. Vasquez, you might want to see this," called out Jake Morrison, the lead contractor. He was crouched behind where the desk had been, holding a small flashlight. Linda walked over and peered into the narrow space between the wall and where the desk had stood. The gap was only about 6 inches wide, but it was deep enough that items could fall down behind the desk and remain hidden for years. "Looks like you've got a little lost and found back here," Jake said, reaching into the space with a long-handled tool. "Lots of dust bunnies, a few pens, some change." He paused, pulling out a small piece of paper. "And this." Linda took the paper from Jake and immediately recognized what it was. A service slip from her own salon, the kind of receipt she gave to every customer, with details about their appointment and payment. But this slip was different. It was older than any she'd seen in years, yellowed with age and slightly crumpled. And when Linda read the name at the top, her heart stopped. Sarah Martinez. October 14, 2020. Cut in style. 65 euros. Paid cash. Linda's hands began to shake. She remembered that name, remembered that night. remembered the police investigation that had consumed her life for months afterward. Sarah Martinez was the woman who had disappeared after leaving her salon 10 years ago. But there was something else on the service slip, something that made Linda's blood run cold. At the bottom, in the section where stylists sometimes wrote notes about the service or the customer's preferences, someone had written in small, careful handwriting, "Followed home. Blue house on Elm Street. Husband works late Thursdays." Linda dropped the paper as if it had burned her fingers. With trembling hands, she picked up her phone and dialed the number she'd memorized a decade earlier. "Millbrook Police Department, this is Officer Chen. How can I help you? I need to speak to Detective Morrison immediately. This is about the Sarah Martinez case." "Ma'am, Detective Morrison retired several years ago. Can I help you with something?" "Then I need to speak to whoever is handling cold cases. I just found evidence in the Sarah Martinez disappearance." Within 30 minutes, Linda's salon was swarming with police officers. Detective Sarah Kim, who had taken over Morrison's caseload, arrived with a team of forensic specialists who carefully photographed and bagged the service slip before examining every inch of the space behind the reception desk. Detective Kim was a methodical investigator who had reviewed Sarah Martinez's case file multiple times over the years. She knew every detail of the investigation, every lead that had been followed, every dead end that had been reached. But this service slip represented the first new evidence in the Hao case since 2010. "Mrs. Vasquez, I need you to think very carefully," Detective Kim said. "Do you remember who was working the night Sarah Martinez disappeared? Who would have written this note?" Linda racked her brain, trying to remember the details of that night 10 years ago. "It was just me and my assistant, Carla Rodriguez. But Carla left the salon business years ago. She moved to Florida with her husband. Do you have contact information for Carla?" "I think so. We exchange Christmas cards, but I haven't talked to her in years." Detective Kim made notes while the forensic team continued their work. The service slip would be tested for fingerprints and DNA, though after 10 years in a dusty space, the chances of finding usable evidence were slim. But the handwriting was clear, and the implications were terrifying. Someone at the salon that night had been watching Sarah, had known where she lived, had known her husband's work schedule. Someone had been planning something. The question was, who? Marcus Chen, no relation to Officer Chen at the police department, received the call at 2:47 p.m. while he was in a meeting with potential investors for his software company. When he saw Detective Kim's number on his phone, his heart began racing. In 10 years, calls from the police had never brought good news. "Mr. Chen, I need you to come to the station as soon as possible. We've found new evidence in Sarah's case." Marcus left the meeting immediately, not bothering to explain to his confused investors why he was suddenly rushing out the door. During the 20-minute drive to the police station, his mind raced through possibilities. Had they found Sarah's body? Her car? Had someone confessed? Detective Kim met him in the same conference room where he'd spent countless hours 10 years earlier, answering questions and providing information about Sarah's life and habits. But this time, Kim was the one with information to share. "Marcus, I want you to look at something, but I need you to prepare yourself. This might be difficult to see." She placed a clear evidence bag on the table containing the service slip. Marcus read it once, then again, then a third time before the full meaning sank in. "Someone was stalking her," he said quietly. "Someone at the salon was watching her, planning something. That's what we believe. The question is who. We're trying to track down everyone who was at the salon that night, everyone who would have had access to write this note." Marcus studied the handwriting. It was neat, feminine, written with what looked like a blue ballpoint pen. "This isn't Sarah's handwriting," he said, "and it doesn't look like Linda's either. I've seen her writing before. We're going to have a handwriting expert analyze it. We're also going to re-interview everyone connected to the salon, including former employees." For the first time in 10 years, Marcus felt something he'd almost forgotten. Hope. Not hope that Sarah was still alive. Too much time had passed for that to be realistic. But hope that they might finally learn the truth about what had happened to her. "Detective Kim, the note mentions a blue house on Elm Street. Sarah and I lived on Oakwood Drive." "We never lived on Elm Street." Kim nodded. "We noticed that too. It's possible the person who wrote this was confused about where Sarah lived, or it's possible they were watching someone else entirely, and the note got mixed up with Sarah's service slip. But even as she said it, Kim didn't believe it. The note was too specific, too detailed to be a mistake. Someone had been watching Sarah Martinez, had known details about her life, and had written those details on her service slip. The question was whether that someone was responsible for Sarah's disappearance, or whether the note was evidence of a separate crime that had never been reported. Kim's team spent the next week re-examining every aspect of the original investigation. They pulled employment records for everyone who had worked at Bella's beauty salon in 2010. They re-interviewed Linda Vasquez and tracked down former employees who had moved away or changed careers. The most promising lead was Carla Rodriguez, Linda's former assistant who had moved to Tampa, Florida, in 2012. Carla had been working the night Sarah disappeared, but she had been interviewed only briefly during the original investigation and had been ruled out as a suspect. Detective Kim called Carla on a Thursday afternoon, 10 days after the service slip had been discovered. "Mrs. Rodriguez, this is Detective Kim with the Millbrook Police Department. I'm calling about the Sarah Martinez case from 2010. I know you were interviewed at the time, but we've discovered some new evidence and I'd like to ask you a few follow-up questions." There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Carla finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was wondering when someone would call about that." Kim felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean, Mrs. Rodriguez?" "I mean, I've been waiting 10 years for someone to ask me the right questions about that night. I'm asking now. What happened the night Sarah Martinez disappeared?" Another pause, longer this time. Kim could hear Carla breathing, could sense the internal struggle taking place on the other end of the line. "Detective Kim, if I tell you what I know, am I going to be in trouble? Because I should have said something years ago, but I was scared, and then so much time passed that I didn't know how to bring it up. Mrs. Rodriguez, right now I'm only interested in finding out what happened to Sarah Martinez. Why don't you start by telling me what you remember about that night?" Carla took a deep breath. "There was another woman there that night, a customer I'd never seen before. She came in around 6 p.m., said she wanted to wait for a walk-in appointment, but we were booked solid. Linda told her she couldn't fit her in, but the woman said she'd wait anyway just in case someone canceled. Did anyone cancel? No. But the woman stayed anyway. She sat in the waiting area for over an hour just watching. I thought it was strange at the time, but you know how it is. Sometimes people are just lonely and want to be around other people." "What did this woman look like?" "Mid-40s, dark hair, average height. She was well-dressed, carried an expensive purse. But there was something about her that made me uncomfortable. She kept staring at Sarah, and when Sarah wasn't looking, she was taking pictures with her phone." Kim's heart began racing. "Pictures of Sarah?" "Yes. And when Sarah went to pay for her service, this woman got up and stood right behind her in line, close enough to see Sarah's credit card, close enough to hear her address when Linda asked if her contact information was still current. Did you see this woman leave?" "She left right after Sarah did. But Detective Kim, there's something else. Something I should have told the police 10 years ago." Kim waited, barely breathing. "I saw her writing something on a piece of paper while Sarah was getting her hair done. At the time, I thought she was just making notes or writing a grocery list or something. But now that you've called, I'm wondering if what, Mrs. Rodriguez? If she was writing down information about Sarah, information she'd overheard or observed." Kim closed her eyes, feeling pieces of a decade-old puzzle finally beginning to fall into place. "Mrs. Rodriguez, I need you to think very carefully. Did you recognize this woman? Had you ever seen her before?" "No, never. But Detective Kim, there's one more thing. After Sarah disappeared, after all the news coverage and the police investigation, I kept thinking I might see that woman again. You know, if she lived in the area, I figured she'd probably come back to the salon eventually." "Did she?" "No, I never saw her again. It was like she just vanished too." The revelation from Carla Rodriguez transformed the Sarah Martinez investigation from a cold case into an active manhunt. Detective Kim assembled a task force that included FBI behavioral analysts, forensic specialists, and investigators from neighboring jurisdictions. For the first time in 10 years, law enforcement had a clear suspect, an unidentified woman who had stalked Sarah at the salon and possibly followed her home. The first step was creating a composite sketch based on Carla's description and the security footage from the salon. FBI sketch artist Maria Santos worked with Carla for hours, refining details until they had a clear image of the suspect. A woman in her mid-40s with shoulder-length dark hair, brown eyes, and what Carla described as an intense stare. The sketch was released to the media on November 1st, 2020, exactly 10 years and 18 days after Sarah's disappearance. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Millbrook Police Tip Line, "This is Officer Martinez. I think I know who that woman is. I've seen her before." The call came in at 9:23 a.m., less than 2 hours after the sketch had been broadcast on the morning news. The caller identified herself as Janet Walsh, a resident of Millbrook who worked as a bank teller at First National Bank. She came into the bank several times in 2010, always asking strange questions about our customers. She wanted to know if we could tell her when specific people made deposits or withdrawals, what their account balances were, that sort of thing. Of course, we couldn't give her that information, but she was very persistent. Detective Kim took the call personally. "Can you describe this woman, Mrs. Walsh?" Mid-40s, dark hair, always very well dressed. She claimed she was a private investigator working on behalf of an insurance company, but something about her seemed off. She never had proper credentials, and her questions were too specific, too personal. "Do you remember what name she gave?" "She said her name was Diana Foster, but when I asked for identification, she always had an excuse for why she didn't have it with her." Kim felt her pulse quicken. "Mrs. Walsh, did this woman ever ask about Sarah Martinez specifically?" There was a pause. "You know, I can't remember specific names, but she was definitely asking about young women in their 20s and 30s. She seemed particularly interested in women who lived alone, or with boyfriends rather than husbands." The tip from Janet Walsh led to a review of security footage from First National Bank. The bank's system archived footage for 7 years, which meant the 2010 recordings had been deleted, but the bank manager was able to provide a list of dates when unusual incidents had been reported by tellers. More tips poured in throughout the day. A grocery store clerk remembered a woman matching the description who had asked inappropriate questions about customers' shopping habits. A postal worker recalled someone claiming to be a private investigator who wanted information about mail delivery patterns for specific addresses. But the most significant tip came from an unexpected source: Tom Bradley, the private investigator Sarah's family had hired in 2010. "Detective Kim, I've been following the news coverage of the new evidence, and I think I may have encountered your suspect during my investigation 10 years ago." Bradley explained that in late 2010, while he was canvassing neighborhoods and interviewing potential witnesses, he had been approached by a woman who claimed to be conducting her own investigation into Sarah's disappearance. She said she was a concerned citizen who wanted to help find Sarah. She asked very detailed questions about my investigation, about what evidence the police had found, about which leads I was following. At the time, I thought she was just someone who had been affected by the case and wanted to help. "Can you describe her?" Mid-40s, dark hair, very well spoken. She knew details about the case that hadn't been released to the public, which should have been a red flag, but I assumed she had inside information from the police or the family. "Did she give you a name?" "Diana Foster. She claimed to be a retired police officer from Chicago who had experience with missing person cases." Detective Kim felt a chill run down her spine. The same name Janet Walsh had mentioned, the same description, the same pattern of inserting herself into situations where she could gather information about potential victims. "Mr. Bradley, did you ever verify her credentials?" "I tried to, but I couldn't find any record of a Diana Foster in the Chicago Police Department. When I tried to contact her again, the phone number she'd given me was disconnected." The investigation into Diana Foster revealed a pattern of behavior that stretched back years before Sarah's disappearance. Using various aliases, the same woman had been spotted at crime scenes, missing person searches, and community meetings throughout the Chicago metropolitan area. FBI behavioral analyst Dr. Rebecca Torres reviewed the evidence and provided a psychological profile of the suspect. "This individual exhibits classic signs of what we call injustice collecting," Dr. Torres explained to the task force. "She's likely someone who feels she's been wronged by society, particularly by women who she perceives as having advantages she lacks. She inserts herself into investigations and tragedies as a way of feeling important and powerful." "But why Sarah specifically?" Detective Kim asked. "Sarah represented something this woman wanted but couldn't have. A loving relationship, financial stability, youth, beauty, Any or all of these could have triggered her obsession. The fact that she spent time observing Sarah at the salon suggests this wasn't random. She was studying her target, learning her habits, planning something. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source: social media. A true crime enthusiast named Ashley Chen, no relation to Marcus, had been following Sarah's case for years and had created a detailed timeline of events on her blog. When the composite sketch was released, Ashley recognized the face immediately. "I've seen this woman in old news footage from other missing person cases," Ashley told Detective Kim during a phone interview. "She's always in the background at press conferences and community searches, but she appears in cases from different states, different years. I think she's been doing this for a long time." Ashley had compiled a list of missing person cases from Illinois, Wisconsin, Indiana, and Michigan, where a woman matching the suspect's description had been spotted at search efforts or community meetings. The list included 12 cases spanning from 2005 to 2015. Detective Kim contacted law enforcement agencies in each jurisdiction and discovered a disturbing pattern. In 8 of the 12 cases, the missing person was a young woman in her 20s or 30s. In 6 of those cases, witnesses had reported seeing a woman matching Diana Foster's description in the AO area shortly before the disappearance. But the most chilling discovery came from the Lake County Sheriff's Department in Indiana. In 2008, a woman named Jennifer Walsh had disappeared after leaving a hair salon in Crown Point. A witness had reported seeing a woman matching Diana Foster's description in the salon that day, asking questions about Jennifer's appointment and seeming to watch her closely. Jennifer's body had been found 3 weeks later in a remote wooded area. She had been strangled. "We always suspected her killer was someone who had stalked her," Detective Lisa Martinez from Lake County told Kim during a conference call. "But we never had enough evidence to identify a suspect. If this is the same woman, she's not just a stalker, she's a serial killer." The task force expanded to include investigators from multiple states. The FBI took the lead, classifying the case as a serial murder investigation. Sarah Martinez was no longer just a missing person. She was likely the victim of a predator who had been hunting women for over a decade. Marcus Chen learned about these developments during a meeting with Detective Kim on November 15, 2020. The news that Sarah had likely been murdered by a serial killer was devastating, but it also provided a strange sense of relief. After 10 years of wondering, of hoping against hope that Sarah might still be alive somewhere, Marcus finally had answers. "Do you think you'll catch her?" Marcus asked. "We're going to do everything we can," Kim replied. "We have her description, we know her methods, and we have evidence linking her to multiple cases. It's only a matter of time." But Diana Foster, if that was even her real name, had proven to be exceptionally careful and methodical. She used cash for transactions, avoided security cameras when possible, and seemed to have an uncanny ability to disappear without a trace. The investigation would require patience, resources, and a little bit of luck. But for the first time in 10 years, law enforcement had a clear picture of who they were looking for and why Sarah Martinez had been targeted. The hunt for a serial killer was about to begin. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit established a command center in Millbrook, transforming the small-town police station into the hub of a multi-state investigation. Special Agent Patricia Reeves, a 20-year veteran of the Bureau with extensive experience in serial killer cases, took charge of the operation. Agent Reeves had seen cases like this before: predators who targeted vulnerable women, who studied their victims carefully before striking, who managed to evade capture for years by constantly moving and changing their methods. But the Diana Foster case was unique in its scope and duration. "We're dealing with someone who has been perfecting her technique for over 15 years, Reeves explained to the task force during their first briefing. "She's not impulsive or disorganized. Every move is calculated, every risk is assessed. That makes her dangerous, but it also means she follows patterns we can identify and predict." The FBI's analysis of the 12 connected cases revealed a disturbing evolution in the suspect's methods. The early cases from 2005 to 2008 showed signs of inexperience: witnesses who remembered her, security footage that captured her image, physical evidence left at crime scenes. But by 2010, when Sarah Martinez disappeared, Diana Foster had become much more sophisticated. She knew how to avoid cameras, how to blend into crowds, how to gather information without arousing suspicion. The fact that it had taken 10 years to discover the service slip with her handwriting suggested she had learned to be extremely careful about leaving evidence behind. "She's been studying law enforcement techniques," Dr. Torres observed. "She knows what we look for, how we investigate, what evidence we need to build a case. That's why she was able to insert herself into investigations. She understood the process well enough to pose as a legitimate investigator." The task force divided into teams, each focusing on a different aspect of the investigation. One team worked on identifying Diana Foster's true identity, using facial recognition software and databases of known criminals. Another team analyzed the geographic pattern of her crimes, looking for connections between the locations and potential safe houses or bases of operation. A third team, led by Detective Kim, focused specifically on Sarah Martinez's case, trying to reconstruct the events of October 14, 2010, and determine what had happened after Sarah left the salon. The breakthrough in Sarah's case came from an unexpected source: Kevin Walsh, the teenager who had been walking his dog on Maple Street the night Sarah disappeared. Kevin was now 28 years old, married, and working as a paramedic in Chicago. When he saw the news coverage about the new evidence, he contacted Detective Kim with additional information he had never shared with police. "I didn't think it was important at the time," Kevin explained during a video call from his apartment in Chicago. "But I remember more details about that night than I told the investigators 10 years ago." Kevin explained that he had been walking his dog, a German Shepherd named Max, around 7:15 p.m. when he saw two cars driving fast down Maple Street. The first car was silver, which he now realized was Sarah's Honda Civic, and the second was a dark sedan following closely behind. "But here's what I didn't mention before," Kevin continued. "About 10 minutes later, I saw the dark sedan come back down the street, driving much slower this time. It stopped in front of the old Miller property. You know, that abandoned house with the overgrown yard, and someone got out." Detective Kim felt her heart racing. "Did you see who got out of the car?" "It was too dark to see clearly, but it looked like a woman. She walked around to the back of the house and disappeared. I thought maybe she was a real estate agent or something, checking on the property." "How long was she there?" "Maybe 20 minutes. Then she came back to the car and drove away." "But Detective Kim, here's the thing that's been bothering me for 10 years. I never saw the silver car come back down the street. The abandoned Miller property was located approximately 2 miles from where Sarah would have turned off Maple Street to head home. The house had been empty since 2008, when the elderly owner had moved to a nursing home. It was surrounded by woods and set back from the road, making it an ideal location for someone who wanted privacy. Detective Kim obtained a search warrant for the property within hours of Kevin's call. The current owner, the estate of the deceased Mr. Miller, gave permission for a full excavation of the grounds. The search began at dawn on November 20th, 2020. Cadaver dogs were brought in to scan the property, followed by ground-penetrating radar to identify any areas where the soil had been disturbed. The basement of the abandoned house was examined inch by inch, looking for any sign that someone had been held there. Marcus Chen stood at the edge of the property, watching the search teams work. After 10 years of wondering, of hoping, of imagining every possible scenario, he was finally going to learn the truth about what had happened to Sarah. The dogs found something on the second day of the search. "Detective Kim, you need to see this," called out Officer Rodriguez, one of the K9 handlers. His dog, a German Shepherd named Scout, was alerting to an area behind the house where the ground appeared to have been disturbed years earlier. The excavation team worked carefully, using brushes and small tools to remove soil, layer by layer. 3 feet down, they found the first piece of evidence, a fragment of silver metal that appeared to be from a car bumper. 6 feet down, they found Sarah's purse. The leather bag was badly deteriorated after 10 years in the ground, but the contents were still identifiable. Sarah's driver's license, her credit cards, her keys, and her cell phone, the phone that had stopped working the night she disappeared. But it was the final discovery that confirmed everyone's worst fears. 8 feet down, wrapped in a plastic tarp that had partially disintegrated over the years, they found human remains. The forensic anthropologist who examined the bones confirmed what everyone already knew. The remains were those of a young woman, approximately 28 years old, who had been dead for approximately 10 years. Dental records would provide final confirmation, but Detective Kim had no doubt they had found Sarah Martinez. The cause of death was strangulation, consistent with the other murders attributed to Diana Foster. Marcus Chen identified Sarah's belongings at the police station that evening, his hands shaking as he held the purse he had given her for her birthday, 3 years before she disappeared. After a decade of uncertainty, he finally had the closure he had both dreaded and desperately needed. She didn't suffer. Dr. Patricia Hayes, the medical examiner, told Marcus gently. Based on the evidence, this happened quickly. She wouldn't have been in pain for long. It was small comfort, but it was something. The discovery of Sarah's remains provided crucial evidence for the FBI's investigation into Diana Foster. Forensic analysis of the burial site revealed tire tracks that had been preserved in clay soil beneath the body. The tracks matched a specific type of tire that was used on mid-size sedans manufactured between 2008 and 2012. More importantly, investigators found a small piece of fabric caught on a tree branch near the burial site. The fabric appeared to be from a woman's jacket, and it contained DNA that didn't match Sarah's. "We finally have her DNA," Agent Reeves announced to the task force. "Now we just need to find her." The DNA was run through every available database: CODIS, missing persons files, arrest records, and genealogy websites. There were no direct matches, but the genealogy analysis provided a potential breakthrough. The DNA belonged to someone with Eastern European ancestry, specifically Polish or Czech heritage. The investigation was closing in on Diana Foster, but she remained one step ahead of law enforcement. Somewhere out there, a serial killer who had been hunting women for over 15 years was still free, still dangerous, and still looking for her next victim. But for the first time since 2010, investigators had physical evidence, a clear suspect description, and a comprehensive understanding of her methods. The net was tightening, and Diana Foster's days of freedom were numbered. The question was whether they would catch her before she killed again. The manhunt for Diana Foster became one of the most intensive investigations in the history of the Chicago metropolitan area. Within hours of identifying her through the service slip, law enforcement agencies across 3 states had her photograph, description, and known aliases. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit was brought in to create a comprehensive profile, and the case was featured on every major news network in the country. But Diana Foster had vanished as completely as her victims. The address on the service slip led to an abandoned warehouse in Gary, Indiana, that had been empty for over 2 years. The phone number was disconnected. The credit card she'd used had been opened with stolen identity information and hadn't been used since the day she'd visited Bella's beauty salon. "She's a ghost," FBI Special Agent Rebecca Torres told the task force assembled to find Diana. "She's been operating under false identities for so long that she's essentially erased her real self from existence." The investigation into Diana's background revealed a pattern of calculated deception that stretched back decades. Birth records showed that Diana Foster had been born in Detroit in 1965, the daughter of an alcoholic mother and an absent father. She'd been in and out of foster care throughout her childhood, displaying early signs of antisocial behavior that had been documented by social workers but never properly addressed. At age 16, Diana had simply disappeared from the system. No one had reported her missing. No one had looked for her. She had become invisible, and she had used that invisibility to reinvent herself over and over again. "We've found at least 12 different identities she's used over the years," Agent Torres explained to Marcus during one of their briefings. "Different names, different backgrounds, different stories. She's incredibly sophisticated in her ability to create and maintain false personas." The psychological profile painted a picture of a woman driven by a complex mixture of rage, jealousy, and a pathological need for control. Dr. Sarah Chen, the FBI's lead behavioral analyst on the case, believed that Diana targeted women who represented everything she felt she'd been denied in life. "She chooses victims who are loved, who have stable relationships, who appear happy and fulfilled," Dr. Chen explained. Sarah Martinez fit that profile perfectly. Young, attractive, in a loving relationship with a bright future ahead of her. Diana saw in Sarah everything she wanted but could never have. The investigation revealed that Diana had been stalking Sarah for weeks before the abduction. Security footage from Sarah's workplace showed Diana in the parking lot on multiple occasions, always keeping her distance, always careful to avoid the cameras. Phone records confirmed that Diana had been making the hang-up calls to Sarah's office, testing her schedule and routine. She studied Sarah like a scientist studying a specimen, Detective Morrison, who had come out of retirement to work on the case, told Marcus. She knew where Sarah worked, where she lived, where she got her hair done. She knew Sarah's schedule better than Sarah did. The search for Diana's current location focused on areas where she might feel comfortable operating. Small towns with transient populations, places where a woman could blend in without attracting attention. The FBI created a map showing the locations of all her known activities over the past 15 years, looking for patterns that might indicate where she would go to ground. But Diana had always been careful to avoid patterns. She never stayed in one place for more than a few months. She never used the same identity twice in the same geographic area. She was like smoke, impossible to grasp or contain. Meanwhile, the discovery of Sarah's case had prompted law enforcement agencies across the country to review their own cold cases, looking for disappearances that might fit Diana's pattern. The results were chilling. In Oregon, a 26-year-old teacher named Jennifer Walsh had vanished after leaving a coffee shop in 2012. Witnesses remembered seeing a woman matching Diana's description in the shop that day, asking questions about Jennifer's schedule. In Colorado, a 29-year-old nurse named Amanda Rodriguez had disappeared from a hospital parking lot in 2014. Security footage showed her talking to an unidentified woman near her car just minutes before she vanished. In Florida, a 31-year-old real estate agent named Michelle Thompson had gone missing after showing a house to a potential buyer in 2016. The buyer had given a false name and phone number, and witnesses described her as a woman in her 40s with dark hair and an intense stare. Each case shared the same characteristics: young women with stable lives and loving relationships, no obvious enemies or reasons to disappear, and sightings of a mysterious woman in the days or hours before they vanished. In each case, the women had simply evaporated, leaving behind no trace of what had happened to them. We're looking at a serial killer who's been operating for at least 15 years, Agent Torres announced at a press conference that was broadcast nationwide. We believe Diana Foster is responsible for the disappearances of at least 6 women and possibly many more. The press conference included a detailed description of Diana and a warning to women across the country to be aware of their surroundings and to report any suspicious encounters with strangers. The FBI also announced a $100,000 reward for information leading to Diana's capture. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The FBI tip line received over 3,000 calls. In the first 24 hours after the press conference, sightings were reported from every state in the country, from gas stations in Texas to shopping malls in Maine. Most of the tips were false alarms. Well-meaning citizens who thought they'd seen Diana but had actually encountered women who simply bore a passing resemblance to her. But buried in the flood of useless information were a few leads that seemed promising. A motel clerk in Nevada reported that a woman matching Diana's description had stayed at his establishment for 3 nights in September, paying cash and avoiding the security cameras. She had registered under the name Carol Williams and had driven a blue sedan with Illinois plates. A waitress in Arizona remembered serving a woman who looked like Diana at a truck stop diner. The woman had been alone, had paid cash, and had asked detailed questions about the local area, particularly about isolated roads and abandoned buildings. A gas station attendant in New Mexico reported selling cigarettes to a woman who matched Diana's description. She had been driving a different car, a red pickup truck, and had seemed nervous, constantly checking her mirrors as if she thought she was being followed. Each lead was investigated thoroughly, but Diana always seemed to be one step ahead of law enforcement. By the time investigators arrived at any location where she'd been spotted, she was long gone, having disappeared into the vast network of highways and small towns that crisscrossed the American landscape. She's not just running, Dr. Chen observed during one of the task force meetings. She's hunting. Even while she's being pursued, she's looking for her next victim. This assessment proved to be tragically accurate. On November 15, 2020, just 3 weeks after Diana's identity had been revealed to the public, a 27-year-old veterinarian named Lisa Park disappeared from a shopping center parking lot in Tucson, Arizona. Security footage showed her talking to a woman near her car, a woman who kept her face turned away from the cameras but whose body language and mannerisms matched Diana's profile perfectly. Lisa's car was found 2 days later in the desert outside Tucson, abandoned and wiped clean of fingerprints. There was no sign of Lisa herself, and despite an extensive search of the surrounding area, no trace of her was ever found. The realization that Diana had struck again, while being actively hunted by law enforcement, was devastating to everyone involved in the investigation. Marcus felt a crushing sense of guilt, as if his decision to publicize Sarah's case had somehow put Lisa Park in danger. "This isn't your fault," Agent Torres assured him during a phone call that lasted well past midnight. "Diana Foster is a predator. She was going to kill again regardless of whether we were looking for her. At least now we know who she is and what she looks like. But knowing Diana's identity and actually catching her were two very different things." As 2020 turned into 2021, the task force continued to chase leads across the country, always arriving too late, always finding that Diana had moved on to her next hunting ground. The investigation had consumed Marcus's life completely. He had sold his software company and dedicated himself full-time to finding Diana Foster. He traveled to every location where she'd been spotted, interviewed every witness who claimed to have seen her, and maintained a website that tracked her movements and appealed for information from the public. The website, finddianafoster.com, became a hub for amateur investigators and true crime enthusiasts who were fascinated by the case. Users shared theories, analyzed evidence, and reported potential sightings from around the world. Most of the information was useless, but occasionally someone would post something that provided a genuine lead. It was through the website that Marcus first learned about the pattern in Diana's movements. A user named TruthSeeker47 had created a detailed map showing all of Diana's confirmed locations over the past year, and the pattern was unmistakable. She was moving in a large circle, gradually working her way back toward the Midwest. "She's coming home," Marcus realized during a late-night phone call with Detective Morrison. "She's been running for over a year, but she's heading back to where it all started." The task force immediately shifted their focus to the Chicago area, setting up surveillance at locations where Diana might surface. They monitored hotels and motels, watched for suspicious activity at beauty salons and coffee shops, and alerted every law enforcement agency in the region to be on the lookout for her. But Diana Foster had one more surprise in store for them. On March 10, 2021, exactly 18 months after the service slip had been discovered, Marcus received a phone call that would change everything. The caller ID showed a number he didn't recognize, but when he answered, the voice on the other end was unmistakably familiar. "Hello, Marcus," Diana Foster said, her voice calm and controlled. "I think it's time we talked." The phone call lasted exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds, and every word was recorded by the FBI surveillance equipment that had been monitoring Marcus's phone for months. Diana's voice was steady, almost conversational, as if she were calling an old friend rather than the boyfriend of one of her victims. "I've been watching the news coverage," Diana said. "You've become quite the celebrity, haven't you? The devoted boyfriend who never gave up hope. It's really quite touching." Marcus's hands were shaking as he held the phone, but he forced his voice to remain calm. The FBI had trained him for this possibility, coaching him on how to keep Diana talking if she ever made contact. "Where is Sarah?" Marcus asked. "What did you do to her?" Diana laughed, a sound that was somehow both musical and chilling. "Straight to the point. I like that about you, Marcus. You don't waste time with small talk. Just tell me where she is." "Sarah is exactly where she belongs," Diana replied. "She's in a place where she can't hurt anyone anymore, where she can't flaunt her perfect little life in front of people who have nothing. She never hurt anyone. Sarah was kind to everyone she met." "Kind?" Diana's voice took on a sharp edge. "Do you know what it's like to watch someone like Sarah every day? To see her smile and laugh and take for granted everything that other people would kill for? She had you. She had her family. She had her job, her friends, her whole perfect little world. And she acted like she deserved it all." Marcus could hear the rage building in Diana's voice, the same fury that had driven her to kill for over 15 years. He knew he needed to keep her talking to give the FBI time to trace the call. "You could have had those things too," Marcus said. "You could have built a life for yourself instead of destroying other people's lives." "Could I?" Diana's laugh was bitter now. "Do you know what my childhood was like, Marcus? Do you know what it's like to be thrown away by everyone who's supposed to love you? To watch other children get adopted while you age out of the system? To realize that nobody wants you, that nobody will ever want you, that doesn't justify what you've done. Justify? I'm not trying to justify anything. I'm explaining. There are people in this world who get everything handed to them, and there are people who get nothing. Sarah was one of the lucky ones, and I made sure she understood how lucky she was before she died. The word died hit Marcus like a physical blow. Even though he had known, logically, that Sarah was almost certainly dead, hearing Diana confirm it was devastating. How? Marcus whispered. How did she die? Peacefully, Diana said, and for the first time her voice softened slightly. I'm not a monster, Marcus. I didn't torture her. I simply helped her understand that her perfect life was an illusion, that everything she thought was permanent could disappear in an instant, and then I let her go. Where is her body? Somewhere beautiful. Somewhere she can rest without being disturbed by people like you who refuse to let go. The line went quiet for a moment, and Marcus could hear Diana breathing on the other end. When she spoke again, her voice had changed, becoming almost wistful. I've been thinking about you a lot, Marcus. About how devoted you've been. How you've spent 10 years of your life searching for someone who's never coming home. It's really quite romantic, in a tragic sort of way. If you have any humanity left, you'll tell me where she is so I can give her a proper burial. Humanity? Diana laughed again. Humanity is what Sarah showed me when she looked right through me in that salon like I was invisible, like I didn't matter. Humanity is what you're showing me now by treating me like a monster instead of a person who was broken by the world long before she ever hurt anyone else. Marcus could hear Agent Torres in his earpiece, urging him to keep Diana talking. The trace was taking longer than expected, possibly because Diana was using some kind of technology to mask her location. I don't think you're a monster, Marcus said, though the words felt like poison in his mouth. I think you're someone who was hurt, and who hurt other people because of it. But it doesn't have to continue. You can stop this. You can tell me where Sarah is and turn yourself in. Turn myself in? Diana's voice was incredulous. So I can spend the rest of my life in a cage, being studied by psychiatrists who want to understand what made me this way? So I can become a case. Study for criminal justice students? No, thank you. Then why did you call me? Diana was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm tired, Marcus. I'm tired of running, tired of hiding, tired of being alone. I've been invisible for so long that sometimes I wonder if I actually exist at all. Calling you makes me feel real again. You are real, and you can choose to do the right thing. The right thing, Diana repeated. Do. You know what the right thing would have been, Marcus? The right thing would have been for someone to love me when I was 7 years old and being passed from foster home to foster home. The right thing would have been for someone to notice when I was 14 and living on the streets. The right thing would have been for the world to care about me before I stopped caring about the world. Marcus could hear the pain in her voice, the decades of hurt and abandonment that had twisted her into something unrecognizable. For just a moment he felt a flicker of sympathy for the broken child Diana had once been. But then he thought about Sarah, about the life she'd never gotten to live, about the family who still didn't know where their daughter was buried. It's not too late, Marcus said. You can still do something good. You can give Sarah's family peace. Peace, Diana said softly. I wonder what that feels like. The line went quiet again, and Marcus was afraid that Diana had hung up. But then she spoke one more time, her voice so quiet he had to strain to hear her. Goodbye, Marcus. Take care of yourself. The call ended, and Marcus immediately looked at Agent Torres, who was shaking her head. The trace had been unsuccessful. Diana had used a sophisticated system to bounce her call through multiple servers, making it impossible to determine her actual location. But the call had provided valuable intelligence. Diana's psychological state was deteriorating. She was becoming more reckless, more emotional, more likely to make mistakes. The fact that she had reached out to Marcus suggested that she was craving human connection, that her years of isolation were taking a toll. She's breaking down, Dr. Chen observed after listening to the recording. The call was essentially a confession, but it was also a cry for help. She's conflicted about what she's done, and that conflict is making her unstable. The task force used the call to refine their psychological profile of Diana. They predicted that she would likely make contact again, possibly with other family members of her victims. They also believed that she was somewhere in the Midwest, probably within a few hundred miles of Chicago. They were right on both counts. Over the next 2 weeks, Diana called the families of 3 other victims. She spoke to Jennifer Walsh's mother in Oregon, to Amanda Rodriguez's sister in Colorado, and to Michelle, Thompson's husband in Florida. Each call followed the same pattern. Diana would express a twisted form of sympathy for their loss, provide just enough detail about their loved one's final moments to confirm that she was the killer, and then hang up before the call could be traced. The calls were devastating to the families, but they also provided crucial information. Diana was clearly spiraling, becoming more compulsive and less careful. She was also revealing details about her crimes that only the killer would know, details that would be crucial if she was ever brought to trial. And then on March 28, 2021, Diana Foster made her final mistake. She returned to Bella's beauty salon. Linda Vasquez was working late, preparing for a busy Saturday when she noticed a woman standing outside the salon, staring through the window. The woman was older than Linda remembered. Her hair was different, and she was wearing glasses, but there was something familiar about her. Posture, her way of moving. Linda looked more closely and felt her blood run cold. It was the woman from 10 years ago, the woman who had been watching Sarah Martinez on the night she disappeared. Linda immediately called 911, speaking in a whisper as she watched Diana through the window. "This is Linda Vasquez at Bella's Beauty Salon on Commerce Street. The woman you've been looking for, Diana Foster. She's here. She's standing outside my salon right now." The response was immediate. Within minutes, the salon was surrounded by police cars, FBI agents, and SWAT team members. Diana made no attempt to run. She simply stood there, staring at the building where she had first seen Sarah Martinez, as if she were visiting a shrine. When Agent Torres approached her with her weapon drawn, Diana smiled. "I was wondering when you'd find me," she said calmly. "I've been waiting here for almost an hour." As the handcuffs clicked around her wrists, Diana looked directly at the news cameras that had already arrived on the scene. "Tell Marcus I kept my promise," she said. "Tell him Sarah is somewhere beautiful." And with those words, the 10-year hunt for Diana Foster finally came to an end. The trial of Diana Foster began on a cold February morning in 2021, almost 11 years after Sarah Martinez had disappeared. The courtroom was packed with families of victims, journalists, and members of the public who had followed the case since the beginning. Marcus sat in the front row, flanked by Sarah's parents, Maria and Roberto Martinez, who had flown in from Texas for the proceedings. Diana Foster looked nothing like the confident predator who had stalked women across 3 states for over 15 years. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her graying hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, she appeared smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her crimes. But when she looked at the families of her victims, Marcus could still see the cold calculation in her eyes that had made her such an effective killer. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh presented evidence linking Diana to 7 confirmed murders, spanning from 2005 to 2019. The service slip from Bella's beauty salon was just the beginning. Once investigators knew who they were looking for, they had uncovered a trail of evidence that painted a picture of a meticulous, patient killer who had refined her methods over more than a decade. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," DA Walsh said during her opening statement, "Diana Foster is not the grieving widow she pretended to be. She is a predator who used her supposed vulnerability to gain the trust of unsuspecting women, only to murder them in cold blood. The evidence will show that she carefully selected her victims, studied their routines, and struck when they were most vulnerable." The prosecution's star witness was Dr. Rebecca Chen, the forensic psychologist who had profiled Diana's behavior. Dr. Chen explained how Diana had used her cover story as a recent widow to approach women in vulnerable situations, at salons, coffee shops, support groups, anywhere women might be receptive to conversation with someone who seemed to understand their struggles. The defendant exhibited classic signs of antisocial personality disorder, Dr. Chen testified. She was capable of mimicking empathy and forming superficial relationships, but she lacked genuine emotional connection to other human beings. To her, her victims were not people. They were objects to be manipulated and ultimately destroyed. The evidence against Diana was overwhelming. In addition to the service slip that had led to her identification, investigators had found DNA evidence in her apartment, linking her to 3 victims. Her laptop contained detailed files on dozens of women, including photographs, personal information, and what appeared to be hunting schedules. Most damning of all, they had found a storage unit rented under one of her aliases that contained personal belongings from her victims: jewelry, driver's licenses, and, in Sarah's case, her engagement ring that Marcus had given her just weeks before her disappearance. Marcus had to leave the courtroom when the prosecutor displayed Sarah's ring as evidence. The sight of it, the simple solitaire diamond he'd saved for months to buy, brought back a flood of memories that threatened to overwhelm him. Maria Martinez followed him into the hallway and held him as he sobbed, both of them grieving not just for Sarah, but for all the years they'd lost wondering what had happened to her. The defense's strategy was predictable but desperate. Diana's attorney, a public defender named Michael Torres, argued that his client was mentally ill and not responsible for her actions. He painted a picture of a woman who had been traumatized by her husband's death and had suffered a complete psychological break that led to her crimes. Diana Foster is not a monster, Torres argued. She is a deeply disturbed woman who needs treatment, not execution. The death of her husband triggered a psychotic episode that lasted for years, during which she was not capable of understanding the nature of her actions. But the prosecution's rebuttal was swift and decisive. They presented evidence showing that Diana had been planning her crimes methodically, that she had taken steps to avoid detection, and that she had shown clear awareness of right and wrong throughout her killing spree. The carefully organized files on her victims, the multiple aliases, the strategic disposal of evidence, none of it suggested someone who was out of touch with reality. The most powerful moment of the trial came when Marcus took the stand to testify about Sarah's disappearance. He spoke about their relationship, about the dinner he'd prepared that night, about the 10 years he'd spent searching for answers. His voice broke as he described finding Sarah's engagement ring among Diana's trophies. "Sarah was going to be my wife," Marcus said, looking directly at Diana Foster. "We were going to build a life together, maybe have children, grow old together. You took all of that away from us. You took away her future, my future, her family's future. For what? What did killing her accomplish?" Diana showed no emotion during Marcus's testimony. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, staring straight ahead as if she were listening to a weather report rather than the testimony of a man whose life she had destroyed. The jury deliberated for less than 6 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, the foreman stood and delivered 7 guilty verdicts, 1 for each confirmed murder. Diana Foster was convicted of first-degree murder in all cases, with additional charges of kidnapping, evidence, tampering, and identity theft. During the sentencing phase, the families of Diana's victims were given the opportunity to address the court. One by one, they stood and spoke about their loved ones, daughters, sisters, mothers, friends who had been stolen from them by a woman who saw other human beings as nothing more than prey. Sarah's mother, Maria Martinez, was the last to speak. She walked slowly to the podium, her hands shaking as she unfolded a piece of paper containing the statement she'd written. "My daughter Sarah was 28 years old when you murdered her," Maria said, her voice steady despite her tears. "She was kind, generous, and full of life. She volunteered at animal shelters, remembered everyone's birthday, and brought soup to sick co-workers. She was planning to marry the love of her life and start a family. You stole all of that from her, from us, from the world." Maria paused, looking directly at Diana Foster. "I don't understand how someone can have so much hatred in their heart that they can take innocent lives. I don't understand how you could look at my beautiful daughter and see someone who deserved to die. But I want you to know that despite what you did, Sarah's memory lives on. She is remembered with love by everyone who knew her, and that love is stronger than your hatred." Judge Patricia Hoffman sentenced Diana Foster to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each count, to be served consecutively. It was effectively 7 life sentences, ensuring that Diana would never again have the opportunity to hurt another innocent person. As the bailiff led Diana away in shackles, she turned and looked at the families of her victims one last time. For just a moment, Marcus thought he saw something that might have been remorse in her eyes. But then she turned away, and he realized it was probably just his imagination, his desperate hope that somewhere inside this monster was a human being capable of understanding the magnitude of what she had done. After the trial, Marcus stood outside the courthouse with Sarah's parents and Detective Morrison. who had come out of retirement to see the case through to its conclusion. The media was there, of course, asking for statements and reactions to the verdict, but Marcus found that he had nothing to say to the cameras. Justice had been served, but it felt hollow somehow. Sarah was still gone, and no amount of punishment for her killer could bring her back. "What happens now?" Maria Martinez asked Detective Morrison. "Now Diana Foster spends the rest of her life in prison, where she belongs," Morrison replied. "And hopefully, the families of her victims can begin to find some peace." Marcus wasn't sure about peace. The anger that had sustained him through 10 years of searching was gone, replaced by a profound sadness that felt like it might never fully heal. But there was also something else, a sense of closure that he hadn't expected to feel. For 10 years he had lived with the terrible uncertainty of not knowing what had happened to Sarah. He had imagined every possible scenario, from the hopeful, she had amnesia and would one day remember who she was, to the horrific, she was being held captive somewhere, suffering daily. The truth was awful, but it was still the truth, and there was a strange comfort in finally knowing. 6 months after Diana Foster's sentencing, Marcus did something he hadn't been able to do for over a decade. He visited Sarah's grave. Her body had never been found, but her family had erected a memorial stone in the cemetery where her grandparents were buried. It was a simple granite marker with her name, dates, and the inscription, "Beloved daughter, sister, and friend." Marcus knelt beside the stone and placed a bouquet of sunflowers, Sarah's favorite, at its base. He told her about the trial, about Diana Foster's conviction, about how her family was doing. He told her about his software company, about the house he'd bought, about the therapy he'd started to help him process his grief, and he told her that he was ready to try to move forward with his life. "I'll never forget you," he whispered to the stone. "I'll never stop loving you. But I think it's time for me to try to be happy again. I think that's what you would want." As Marcus drove away from the cemetery, he thought about the service slip that had finally brought Sarah's killer to justice. Such a small thing. A piece of paper that had fallen from Sarah's purse and been overlooked for 10 years. It made him think about how many other small details might be hiding in plain sight, waiting to solve other mysteries, to bring other families the closure they desperately needed. Diana Foster was in prison, but there were other predators out there, other families searching for missing loved ones, other cases that seemed impossible to solve. Marcus couldn't bring Sarah back, but maybe he could help ensure that other families didn't have to endure what he and the Martinez family had gone through. 3 months later, Marcus established the Sarah Martinez Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting families of missing persons and funding advanced forensic technology for law enforcement agencies. The foundation's first major initiative was a program to digitize and re-examine cold case evidence using new DNA analysis techniques. "Sarah always wanted to help people," Marcus said during the foundation's launch event. "She can't do that herself anymore, but her memory can continue to make a difference in the world." The foundation's work led to the resolution of dozens of cold cases over the following years. Families found answers, killers were brought to justice, and missing persons were located and reunited with their loved ones. It wasn't the life Marcus had planned to live, but it was a life that had meaning, a life that honored Sarah's memory in a way that felt right. Diana Foster died in prison in 2028, 7 years after her conviction. She never confessed to her crimes, never showed remorse for her actions, and never revealed the locations of her victims' bodies. She took those secrets to her grave, leaving some families still searching for their loved ones. But her death marked the end of a chapter that had begun on a dark October night in 2010 when a young woman named Sarah Martinez left a beauty salon and drove into the darkness, never to return home. It was a chapter filled with grief and loss, but also with love, determination, and ultimately justice. Sarah's story became a reminder that even in the darkest circumstances, even when hope seems lost, the truth has a way of emerging. Sometimes it takes 10 years and a forgotten piece of paper. Sometimes it takes the dedication of investigators who refuse to give up. Sometimes it takes the love of family and friends who keep searching long after others have moved on. But the truth always finds a way. Note, this story is entirely fictional. Any resemblance to real persons, places, or events is purely coincidental.